All right, looks like we're ready to go. Thanks everyone for coming this evening. We have a large agenda, so we'll try to get through it as quickly as possible. And yeah, we just have to shift a couple of things around. So when we go through and improve the agenda, we're going to move 10, 11, and 12 up to the top because Laurel does have to leave. So it'll just be a shuffle around in the order. So with that, we'll call the meeting to order. Is there any declaration of conflicts? All right, seeing none. Approval of the agenda, please, with the minor shuffle. Rich, thank you. Moved?
I'll second.
Second it. Thank you. All in favor? All right, approved. Adoption of the minutes from the previous meeting, Monday, June 1st.
Moved.
Moved. Second, Helen. Thank you. All right, moved and seconded. All in favor? All right, motion carried. Any business arising from the minutes? All right, seeing none, we'll move right into reports. So Laurel, we'll start with you. So if everyone can go to number 10, which is the 53 Towers Road. Is that right?
Yes, it should be.
Just give everyone a second, Laurel, to get to the right spot. Including me. All right, we're all set? Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail in this one because it's been before the board a few times before, but it's basically an amendment to the development concept plan that was approved and the existing development agreement. On this lot, I lose my pointer when it hits the screen, but there's basically a 60-unit apartment building, and that was approved through the comprehensive development plan process. The applicant, when the building was under construction, she had 2 guest suites in it to provide for overnight guests if they were coming in to visit people that lived full-time in the apartment building. Those guest suites weren't equipped with kitchens. However, she was approached by Canadian Mental Health Association, and they are looking for units for some of their tenants. So they asked if she would be interested, and she also sits on that board, in providing some units within her building, and she suggested these 2 units as bachelor units. So she's basically applying to amend the development concept plan and agreement to allow for those 2 extra units. Staff doesn't have an issue with it. It's just that it has to follow the process. Any amendments to a comprehensive development area has to go through the process for a public meeting. We aren't able to approve it at the staff level. So therefore, we are recommending for it to proceed to public consultation. There's various sections in the official plan that support these kind of units and availability of housing for people in various sectors of the population. So our recommendation is to proceed to public consultation.
All right, thanks, Laurel. Any questions for Laurel from the floor?
If it receives opposition at the public meeting for whatever reason, where does that stand? And they're already building, the building's almost done.
Well, then they would just remain, I mean, the public doesn't always control what happens in the process. They have to have good reason why, they don't agree with it, but it's up to council to, decide whether they want to allow the 2 extra units or not. But if they didn't, then they would just remain as guest suites with no kitchen. They wouldn't be rented to the tenants that she's proposing. They would just be available for guests that would be coming in to visit people that live in the apartments. So it would be as it is currently.
All right, any other questions? Right, if someone wants to put a motion on the floor. Rich? All right, we have a motion on the floor to accept staff's recommendation to go to a public meeting. Seconded by Basil, thank you. All right, is there any further discussion? All right, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, motion is carried.
Okay, the next one is amendments to the MUR zone, the medium density mixed residential zone. And basically in 2016, the city adopted the East Royalty Master Plan, and when we adopted the East Royalty Master Plan, there was a policy under the zoning and development bylaw to implement that plan, and the MUR zone was created. So that the MUR zone is to allow for mixing of residential unit types, and basically the purpose of the zone was to create an area with various forms of housing options and topologies, so that you wouldn't have one continuous type of housing form throughout the whole East Royalty area. So over the past 4 years, since the adoption of the East Royalty Plan, staff, we've worked closely with the developers and we've reviewed subdivision proposals within the MUR zone. And with the subdivision layouts that are coming forward, both staff and the developers have had difficulty with the placement and spacing of certain building topologies along streetscapes, and to create that whole mixing formula and the percentages that's required in the MUR zone. So basically, the current mixing formula just made it difficult to have any type of building groupings along the streetscape. So, in addition, the amount of units permitted in townhouse dwellings was low for today's construction standards and market requirements. So, staff are proposing the following amendments that you see on the screen. And it was in your report. If you have any questions, I can
Thanks,
answer
Laurel.
them.
I just sent Alex out to see if we can I can hear the delayed. Can we lower the volume all down there? Is that the TV that we can hear up there? I wonder if we can fill the volume down just a tiny, tiny bit.
Oh,
That's you talking, just 30 seconds late.
didn't know.
All right. While they try to figure that out, any comments or questions from the board? Again, this is to proceed to a public meeting.
Exactly, public consultation.
Yeah.
What areas of concern does the staff have?
Well, basically when we're working with the subdivision layout, the way the MUR zone is broke up, it's broke up in percentages. So I believe it's like 35% of one type and 35% of another, 20% of some. And to get that mixing formula and the spacing that's also outlined within the bylaw, it was very, when you were trying to lay out buildings, a lot of times it didn't work because you would end up with either not able to provide the right percentages, or you would end up with two buildings beside each other that weren't supposed to be beside each other. So it wasn't working out, so we sat down and we looked at it again and we tried to work out a formula that worked better for designing the subdivisions and also to meet the new market demands. So that's why we're proposing these amendments. Another thing to point out, you'll notice in the wording, one of the things is it talks about semi-detached dwellings, that you have to have a single beside a semi-detached dwelling. When I originally drafted the bylaw, the East Royalty bylaw amendments, it said a run of semi-detached dwellings. A single detached dwelling had to be located beside a run of them. But when the bylaw got amended again in 2018, they took out that one word, run. So now the developers were having to put a semi-detached, a semi-detached, and a single, which didn't work. It wasn't supposed to be like that originally. It wasn't intended to be like that. So we're correcting that as well.
But it says they still have to be flanked by a single
so if you,
detached dwelling.
exactly. So if you have 4 or 5 semi-detached dwellings, you have to have one single detached dwelling beside it. Not a single detached dwelling, then a semi, a single detached, and a semi.
All right. Is there any other further questions? Rosemary, can you hear us still?
Yes, I can. Thanks, Greg.
Okay, if you have any questions, just speak up.
All right, thank you.
Don't be shy. All right, any other questions or comments? All right, does anyone want to put a resolution forward, or a motion, sorry? Yes. All right, moved by the mayor, seconded by Councillor McCabe. Thank you. All right, any other further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, motion is carried.
So this next section, section 45.12, private street access, staff are proposing for that section to be repealed. That particular section deals with private streets, and we're recommending that that be removed totally from the bylaw. In the past, the city has allowed the construction of some private streets, and many of those streets were constructed to minimum standards, which resulted in narrower roads with reduced design standards, and a lot of times there were safety concerns with those types of streets. It also created difficulty for snow removal, machinery, parking. We used to get a lot of parking along streets. If they were narrower than normal, didn't have the right shoulders, then it made it difficult for emergency vehicles to get through and access a house if there was a health emergency or fire. We also had issues with storm drain systems because they weren't built to public standards, and a lot of times if there was water on the streets, it would cause issues with adjoining properties or undermine the street because it didn't have the proper storm drainage. So we also had issues with a lot of private streets that when the developers moved on, sold the project to another property owner, then a lot of times people who lived on those streets would come to the city and ask the city to take ownership, and the city doesn't take ownership of streets that don't meet our public road standards. So the zoning and the development bylaw, when we construct streets within the city, you go through the subdivision process, and all those streets are required to meet a specific standard. They're designed by engineers. They have to post security for the subdivision, the construction of the roads and the services that go within them, and that security is posted for up to 2 years. Once those roads go through that 2-year process, if there aren't any deficiencies, then we release the security. If there are deficiencies, we hold the security until those deficiencies are corrected, and if the developer happens to walk away, then the security is there for the city to fix them. The other thing, it is more expensive for a developer to construct a public road, and a lot of times that's why they don't want to do it, but in the long run it is less expensive because they're turning that road system over and the servicing over to the city, and the city takes over ownership and they're responsible for the maintenance, for any future maintenance. So staff is therefore recommending that all streets within the municipality be constructed to public road standards, but we're also stating that any existing private streets, they will be allowed to continue to be used and developed, but anything that's developed going forward has to be developed to public road standards. So existing ones can continue. We're not going to have an issue with those, but we're not going to require them to upgrade to public road standards, but no more private streets within the city.
Thanks, Laurel. Just a quick question for you here. Just looking through the report, was that part and parcel of the same amendments that we just did number 11? I'm just wondering because I don't see a separate. I do see the separate page for it, but is there? Does this have to go to a public meeting?
Yes, it does have to go to a public meeting.
Okay, so do you want to do a separate resolution for that, or a motion for that, or we just group
so
it
you're
in?
talking about attachment D that also deals with private roads?
Well, I see under the one we just approved
Yeah,
that we
so
have section 4512 in the private street access.
So that section's being repealed, and then attachment D is where, I was going to talk about that next, but it's kind of part and parcel with this. That also pertains to private streets. So in the general provisions for subdivision, we're removing all references for private roads, and then we put in provisions for the requirements for existing private roads. So they have to be safe for emergency vehicles, they have to be safe for pedestrians, they have to be you know, kept up, basically. The developer can't just let them disintegrate and not continue maintenance. The other thing we added was because we removed another section in the bylaw when we repealed the previous section. It dealt with private lane access, so we moved that to this section because we do have some areas in East Royalty that when we did the plan, we realized that when they're constructing townhouses, a lot of times you've got several private access or several driveway accesses along a busy public street. So if it's deemed by police and Public Works that it's not safe to have that many driveways in a row, then we will allow rear lane access, which is basically just a driveway access to these to townhouse developments. So it's a rear lane access, and then they would have these smaller driveways that would go into their individual properties. So that's the only instance we would allow something that is similar to a private road, but in reality it's actually a driveway.
Yep. Yeah, fire away, sir.
I don't know if these mics are working. Is this mic working here?
I guess so.
Laura, so it's a 2-year security. That's 24 months. So
Yeah.
let's say if the project's $1 million, right? What's your security at 10%?
No, so the way it works, it would be if it's $1 million project, and that includes the security is based on the construction of the roads, the services, and the cost of engineering. So it's a 25% security. At provisional acceptance, we release half of that security, and we hold that half for another year. At the next year, at final acceptance, we release half of that, and then we hold the remaining quarter until the 2-year period. So as the development progresses, when they hit provisional acceptance and then they hit final acceptance, they're at a stage each time that deficiencies should have occurred, or there's certain work that's been completed. So we don't need as much security as you go along through those phases, and then we release percentages.
Do we have warranty? Well, this is really a warranty. That's
This is your warranty.
Yeah. So the provincial government's warranty is 12 months for capital projects.
I'm not
And
sure what they
is this a best
require.
practice in other jurisdictions?
This is what we've always done.
In other jurisdictions, we just make it's a lot more front-end loaded other places. You
There,
need the
yeah.
standard, there's no waiting. You pay 100% up front. There's very detailed standards you need to meet, and then there's no timeline on it. Because it is inspected by the municipality. So there's a different process here.
Yeah. And one thing to note too, like Alex said, some municipalities do require more than 25%, but the difference between us and the province.
It's other jurisdictions they make you do everything. They make you do
Yeah.
the road.
I know.
They won't accept the road
Yeah.
until they do a very vigorous review of it,
Yeah.
and then they'll accept it over.
Yes.
Everybody has to be paid. There's no way at that stage that the road can end up coming back and costing the municipality.
So there's no
It's-
warranty. You just pay everything up front.
No,
But
there is-
if you've got enough engineers reviewing these roads, there shouldn't be any problem with the road. That's one of the problems in regard to some of these standards on these roads. Anyway, it's a complicated issue, but...
Not to belabor this, Mr. Chair, but a warranty on a road, it will be based on its time-tested trial, which could be 6 months or a year. In our case, we're looking at 24 months to make sure the road meets the test and that it stays in place or stays in the
So-
shape that you want it to keep it in for 8 to 10 years.
Yeah, but I guess we have a history. We have a history of taking roads, even with all of these provisions, and those roads are not...
Oh, I know.
Those roads are not meeting a reasonable and rigorous standard. So, I mean, it's a past practice here. Laurel knows more about it than I, but the other way to go about it, and the development community is used to it, is they pay 100% up front. The municipality doesn't even look at the road until they go out to inspect it, and it is inspected to a T, and if there's any deficiency, the municipality won't take it.
This
So-
is a significant change from what we've been used to.
No, this actually isn't. This
That's
is,
an old standard. This is new. All of that Laurel's alluding to, that's the existing practice.
That's, ever since I started working here 17 years ago, I don't want to age myself, but,
But it's age you.
exactly.
Really? Not really. I was around
A lot.
2003. Sustained quite well.
But, no, we've always had that practice in place, and our warranty is a staged warranty. So if the developer puts $100,000 up front, we hold that $100,000 to provisional acceptance, which could be 3 months down the, no pun intended, 3 months down the road, when they finish constructing the street. And at that time, we would release $50,000 back to the developer. We hold the next $50,000 for another year until final acceptance. So if that road breaks down or the services, there's failure with the services, then that's a security for them to basically make them fix the road. Then at final acceptance, we would release another $25,000 to them, and then we would hold the final $25,000 for another year. So it's up to 2-year security. But we have very few private roads in the city. We haven't had a lot of private road construction, but the ones that we have had, we've had issues with them all. And some municipalities don't even allow private road construction anymore. So that's why we're looking to eliminate that from the bylaw and just move forward with public road requirements from now on.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments or questions? So I'm assuming we need a motion on this.
Mr. Chair, are you going to deal with the signage proposal in that package as well?
I'm not familiar with it, but
I'll do it.
I can.
There's a number of amendments in her report.
Yeah.
And so you can sign off on take whatever direction you want on the two that she proposed, and I'll give the one on the side by law.
Okay. So
it's to proceed to public consultation.
Yeah. Okay, moved and seconded. Thanks, Reg and Chris, whichever you want to pick. All right, any other comments, questions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion is carried. Thanks, Laurel.
Okay, do you want to come up and do?
So in that same package of amendments from Laurel that we just discussed, there is also a request for a change to the fascia sign requirements in the sign bylaw. Because we have now entered into an era where we've got buildings in the downtown where you can achieve a bonus height above 4 stories, and we have step backs. The building is step backed. But the fascia sign bylaw, when we dealt with it, it was dealing with you're allowed to have a roof or a sign on the fascia of the building at the top level if you're 4 stories in height. And then the bylaw says, but if you've got a 5th floor or 6th floor, you then have to put it at the very top. But when you have a step back, the building is step back 10 or 20 feet, and then from the street level, you can't see that sign. Now, if they want to, the way that we're proposing this amendment, so if you want to put the sign at the 4th floor, which has got more street appeal, because when you look up from the street, you're just going to see the 4 floors on the step back. If it's recessed in 20 more feet, you're likely not going to see that from the street. So we're just leaving that open. If they want to use the top floor on the 4th floor to put the fascia sign, and you know, there's no secret. It's the one on Grafton Street is the building. It's one of the first buildings to go up, and they've pointed this out that they would like the opportunity. And again, from our point of view, you're allowed anywhere in the downtown if you have a 4-story building to have a fascia on the 4th floor. But on those higher buildings, then you're restricted to the 5th floor. You have to put the fascia sign, or the 6th floor. But the issue is you can't see it with the step back. The step backs are working very well in my mind. They're hiding that additional density. So it's an evolution of our design standards in the downtown. So we're recommending that go to public meeting, and that adjustment be made in the table in the sign bylaw.
All right, so is there any other amendments that we need to send to a public meeting? We'll do them all. Was that the last one?
That's it.
Okay. Any questions? Comments? Thank you, Your Worship. Seconded, thank you. All right, so any questions, comments? Nothing? All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion is carried. Thanks, Laurel. So I know we have 3 applicants out in the lobby. So for number 1, I believe Riley's here. And then for number 6 and 7. So maybe, I don't know, after 1, if we want to go bump up 6 and 7 so they can go home. Might be a good idea. I know we're shuffling through, but try to stick with me here. All right, so Greg, 385 Queen Street, whenever you're ready.
All right, so this is a request for 1 minor variance in order to reduce the required lot frontage from 98.4 feet to 94.1 in order to construct a 10-unit apartment building at 385 Queen Street. So this application was in front of the board last month. Similar application. They were proposing to retain the existing duplex along Queen Street and construct an 8-unit in behind with access onto Costello Lane. This board recommended approval. It went to council, in which time it was deferred. The applicant looked at the plans in a little more detail, readjusted, and essentially they came back with a new proposal since that time to demolish the duplex and construct just a 10-unit apartment building. It contained 2 affordable units, so 8 plus 2. The driveway, because of the relocation of the apartment building closer to Queen Street, they were able to accommodate the parking further away from the corner of Queen Street and Costello. So they also do not need any setback variances like they once did. Their bylaw allows you to be in line with existing buildings on the street in the front yard, so that would essentially be the other building on this photo to the south of this photo. So essentially, as long as you're in line with that, you meet the requirements of the bylaw and they're meeting the other setbacks. I think that the plan you see here does show a 10-foot setback from the side yard. The applicants have agreed to make that 15 feet or 14.8 as per the bylaw, so there will be a slight change to this plan, but it's just to meet the bylaw. Otherwise, they need a lot frontage minor variance, and staff are recommending approval. There was some opposition to this proposal, mostly surrounding parking, access, and then the type of tenants you may see in an apartment building, as well as the trees that were on the property being removed. So if you have any questions, I can try to answer them. I won't go into a whole lot of detail because it's very similar to the last report, but...
There was letters of support there too, right?
There was, yeah. So in total, there was 3 in support, 4 in support and 3 in opposition.
So Greg, for we can kind of rewind the clock back a month ago.
Yeah.
With this application, they came in with 3 variances, the initial one, for an 8-unit. And there was 2 minor variances and 1 major variance.
2 major, 1 minor. Yeah.
Okay.
The same minor variance applied to both, but then the other one had 2 major setback variances, which this one doesn't.
And one of them was actually recommended by planning staff to reject, but they've rectified that
right
with the new plan.
Yeah, they don't need any setback variances as long as they move that building to 15 feet instead of the 10 that they show. And
they're still planning on putting I read 2 for affordable housing.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
They need to have 2 for the density. The property allows 8 plus you get a 20% bonus, so they are allowed to get 2 affordable, but otherwise they can only do an 8-unit if they don't have affordable.
Okay.
Are they still putting up a fence around?
Yeah, so they're going to need to.
Okay.
The way our bylaw reads is basically for an apartment building, if your parking lot abuts like a residential property, you either have to landscape it with a hedge or planters that are 3.3 feet wide by 3.3 feet tall, or a fence. And it's kind of at our discretion, staff's discretion. So they will have to have one or both of those options. Yeah, it'll have to abut any low density, which I think is every property except their own that they own to the south. But yeah, basically all the beige photos or beige properties you see there will have to have a fence or landscaping.
So Greg, the applicant is here. Did the applicant want to present? I think
I think he's more here to answer questions, but I can confirm that.
Can you, just to see if he wants to speak? Correct. He has a right to do 8 and the bonus density for 2. Riley, how are you?
Good.
Welcome to planning.
Thank you.
So I don't know if you know how planning works or the how the membership is. We have 2 councillors plus myself, 3, and then we have the mayor also sits on the committee. We're missing 1 board member, which is Councillor Duran. And then we have 6 resident members. We have 5 here, and we have Rosemary on the line, and of course staff. So they'll be making a recommendation to council after tonight. So did you hear Greg's presentation?
Yes.
Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I do want, like I just heard up to the point about putting in a fence, a 6-foot fence.
Yep.
So I did speak with some of the neighboring property owners, and especially the ones on Douglas Street, and they were saying that that's basically, they have no problems with the proposal other than a fence, which I would be in full support of. And if it's a city bylaw, of course, I would obey it. Yep. Yeah.
Okay. So any questions?
Is the building 2-story or 3?
It would stay under the 49 feet. I think it would be 3 stories. Yeah. With 10 units.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
the concerns by the council at the last meeting, regular monthly meeting.
He had
The first proposal was
2.
deferred. That's why it's back here, correct?
It was deferred just because I thought I actually moved for deferral because I think it was heading towards defeat initially, and I think it was heading for defeat for the wrong reasons. So we deferred it to give the applicant a chance to.
Clarify what
The I think the concerns raised by Councillor Tweel was with the density. I believe he stated that he wanted only 6 units plus the 2 existing duplex. And I think he also had concerns with regards to the traffic exiting onto Costello and thought it should actually exit onto Queen Street, which I don't believe would be a good idea, but that's just me.
Yeah, exactly. That's what, so I could have went ahead with building a smaller building in the backyard, but, and then I was only suggested to build 6 units instead of 8. So, and they would have been very small units if I didn't get the variances that I was asking for last time. So with this new plan, I would be able to build the as of right 10 unit, or the as of right 8 units with 2 affordable units, and they would all be good size, fairly standard sizes for 2 and potentially 3 bedroom apartments with all the parking requirements and green space requirements.
And that's with the demolition of the duplex.
Yeah, that's right. That's with the demolition of the duplex.
Correct. So tear that down and put a. Yep.
Yeah, apparently.
Yep. I think those were the concerns. I think it was. I think the councillor of the ward wanted it to be limited to 6 units in total, even though he had, as of right at the time, to build 6. But it was the addition of the 2 affordable housing units that are allowable under our policy. So.
And those additional 2 are coming because of bonus density. I'm trying to care
for affordable housing, correct? Yep, which is allowed, and he's allowed the extra.
Allows 20% extra density as long as they're affordable dwelling units. So,
So is he affordable at the CMHC ruling?
it has to receive some kind of subsidized. So whether it's to the provincial or federal level, he has to provide some kind of subsidy for those 2 units and give us documentation to that effect. So
yeah, I spoke with someone from the provincial affordable housing program, and they know of the program that Charlottetown puts on, but we couldn't continue the discussions until I had a plan of the building to show them what type of units I was building. So now I've been kind of on at a standstill until I get these variances figured out, so that we can continue with drawing the building up and speaking with affordable housing in the city.
So just a point of clarification, will it be the 80% of the average rental in the area, or will it be
25 to 30% of family income?
I'm actually not sure. I know that they do different programs, so I would just work with them, whatever they require.
All right, any other questions? Rich, go ahead.
Would they be the ones responsible as well for administering those 2 units, like getting people to rent it, or are you going to?
Well, I think they have different programs, but my family, we're in the business of rentals, and I know that we do have some affordable units, and we can choose out of certain tenants that do qualify for affordable housing. So I think it's a bit of both, but
Yep.
yeah.
All right, any other questions?
Snow removal was also a concern last time, wasn't it?
Yes,
That-
it was. Yeah.
So, was there any more update or anything on that?
This new plan, especially with the 15-foot setback on the flankage yard, and just having more green space on the Costello side too, I think snow removal shouldn't be a problem. Yeah.
Yeah, last time there didn't seem to be any open space where you could put snow, but this
That's
looks much
right.
better.
Especially with the variances that I was proposing, it was really maximizing the property.
Yep.
But with this, it's I mean, it's a 4% frontage variance, so it's really not too much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Nothing, we need a motion then for council? Anyone want to move to accept?
To accept, yes.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to accept staff's recommendation for approval. Seconded by Chris, thank you. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion is carried. Thanks, Riley.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're gonna switch things up. We're gonna do number 6 right now, which is, Robert, you're up, because I think we have the applicant here for that as well. Sorry for my planning staff for having to go through the slides back and forth. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry.
What property is this?
This is for 506 Malpec Road.
Julie, it's the first one on there.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
All right, Robert, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the application before you tonight is a minor variance to reduce the required setback for a garden suite, which is a self-contained living unit in an accessory structure, from the required 6 feet to 3 feet. The structure will also be situated in the required side yard of the principal dwelling unit, rather than being located in the rear yard, which is a requirement of the garden suite bylaw. This is the subject property itself. It's zoned single detached residential R1, fairly large lots on Lower Malpec Road heading out to the countryside. And you can see there directly to the northern property line there's a large tree buffer. So this is just approaching up the driveway, the walkway to the principal dwelling unit. And as you can see there, just beyond it is the garden suite itself. And then you can see the thick buffer of the tree line to north of that. So it's basically a one-story built on slab. The applicant, or the owner, which was a previous owner at the time, obtained a building permit, and then they also obtained approval from the planning department in 2010 to run a home occupation, which was an art gallery or an art studio. So that's been continuously used as such. Then the new owners, I believe, took it over, and instead of using it as a home occupation or an accessory structure for storage, they wish to turn it into a garden suite for residential occupancy. So that's just a closer up view of it itself. So basically, the table on the screen there is kind of going through the requirements of a garden suite, and then what the proposal is, proposed garden suite, or the existing accessory structure is proposed to be a garden suite. The only deficiency, like I said, is the side yard setback, which is directly to that northern property line where that tree buffer resides. And also, as a note, it's located in the side yard rather than the rear yard. So considering that the applicant or the previous owners obtained a permit, built it as an accessory structure, and now they just want to convert it after the fact, staff thought it would be onerous on the new owners to pick up and move that structure to the rear yard and where garden suites are required. So that's just one thing that staff would like to note to the board. In regards to official plan policies, there's a variety of policies within the OP that speaks to infilling and providing additional density, as well as providing density along service lots. So in this instance, as the board is aware, when you have a garden suite, which is an accessory structure for residential occupancy, they obtain their services, so water and sewer, off of the principal dwelling unit, not off the main line like the principal dwelling unit does. And that's just to ensure that the accessory structure garden suite remains accessory to the principal building and can't be subdivided in the future and sold as a separate property. So basically those regulations would still be maintained. We're recommending approval, and I can take any questions from the board, and I believe the owner is here tonight to take any questions as well. Thank you.
We should ask the owner to, if she wants to come up, just see if she has anything to add. I got a sneaky suspicion that this is exactly what we envisioned one of these accessory or garden suites would look like.
I think they're great.
It actually looks nice,
Yeah,
and tucked away and nice. What's that? I know.
I think they're great.
Yeah. That looks. All right. Hi, Tanya.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. Did you hear the presentation that Robert had?
Yeah.
Anything that you want to add prior to any questions?
Well, I do have a couple things to add. Sorry, can people hear me?
Yep.
So one of the things that I would just like to add, he talked about so there's no windows on the back side of the building, so where that next property is, it's not like tenants could look out over on their property, one. And two, if you look from the other side, if you're coming down the road, you can't even see that accessory building from the next property. And another comment is, we have a large property, and the property next door is not yet developed, but also a large property, so at some point when it is developed, they'll still have lots of room to, they won't be encroached right where we are. And then just one other thing, so the suite has already been changed, but we didn't change it. It was that way when we moved. Okay. So after the previous owners, shut down the gallery, which is what they had, it was a commercial business, they converted it, and they actually had a renter in there for 2.5 years before we bought it. Just as an FYI.
So you're coming in and doing it the right way.
Trying and hoping for...
Wait for a big round of applause. All right. Any questions from the planning board for the applicant? Reg, do you have any questions?
Just long term, let's say 10 years down, what do you anticipate property to be used if something were to happen?
What?
People in the suite. Would it become a rental unit then for you? Or?
Well, that's the hope, is that we would make it a
It is a rental unit now.
It's going to be.
That's what it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Somebody had already converted it to a rental unit, and our hope is to legalize the rental unit, so we can rent it.
Okay. So it's not for family, or it's for whatever?
No, not in this case.
Okay.
No, when we did when we passed the bylaw to allow for the garden suites, it was to eliminate that term of in-law suite and stuff like that, because it was.
Okay. So it's still not.
It was determined discriminatory, right. And so we came up with the garden suite, and detached from the main house. So.
I like it, and I'll move to agree with planning to accept.
All right, I like it as well. So we have a motion on the floor to accept staff's recommendation, seconded by Reg and Basil. All right.
And Bobby.
And Bobby. And Chris. I guess we want to put this one to a vote. All right, no further discussion? What's wrong with you? All right, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, motion's carried.
Thank you so much.
So council will vote on this Monday night, next Monday.
Okay.
And if council approves this, you're good to go.
Okay, so can you attend next Monday as well? Is that
You can watch probably the same idea out there. And
Perfect.
yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks,
All
guys.
right. Thanks. Have a good evening.
Have a good night.
Robert, next one's going to be a little bit tougher. Okay. Number 7, which is 270 Mount Edward Road.
So this application was previously before the board in the fall. It was to do with whether staff could or not accept a variance application for accessory structures or accessory buildings such as garages. We had an older opinion or legal opinion that stated that we wouldn't be able to because the way the bylaw was set up. Major variances were only applied to for Section 8, and Section 8 was principal uses in the previous bylaw. When the existing bylaw was overhauled in the fall of 2018, the variance section was changed as well, and so there was an interpretation from the applicant or the owner's lawyer that indeed it could qualify for the variance process. And we consulted our own opinion, and that was confirmed to be the case. So staff then decided to accept the application itself and analyze it based on its land use merits. So one thing I will qualify for the board tonight is that the structure, as you can see on the screen, was already built. The structure in question just replaced an older garage, and the applicant did construct it without a building permit. We received a complaint, we acted on the complaint, and we found indeed it was in the midst of construction. The owner did cease the construction at that time, and then made an application for 2 variances. So in this case, the variances that the applicant is requesting is to vary the height from the maximum allowable height of 17.5 feet to increase that maximum allowable height to 23 feet, and to vary the maximum gross floor area from the maximum allowable of 750 square feet to 1,200 square feet. So one thing I'll mention is that according to the site plan, the actual structure's footprint is 600 square feet, but because it's 2 stories and we analyze accessory structures based on gross floor area, we have to take into account all floors. So that's why there's such a large deviation there, as you can see. And so basically, when we consulted and said we have to analyze the application, we have to analyze it based on land use only, not on the fact if the applicant built it without a permit or not. So that's what staff did. We basically analyzed the structure based on the built form and the land use compatibility in the neighborhood. So I took some photos of the structure and of the site. And as you can see, the principal dwelling is here at the forefront. It's 2 stories in height as well. And then the the existing accessory structure is in the rear there. As you can see, it's kind of screened by the tree canopy. When you get up to the structure, you can see that it is indeed 2 stories in height. I don't know if you can see from the screen, but if you look at the top, there is an area there for a landing and a door. That would essentially be an access point for potentially a suite above the garage. So even though the applications before tonight is for an accessory structure, there is the potential, and the applicant did state, yes, that in the future they would look at using the 2nd floor for a residential occupancy, which would effectively make it a garden suite. So similar to an application we just looked at tonight. So we analyzed the actual structure that's taken from the back of the property that's situated on Nottingham. There it is there. Drainage flows down onto the side property line and then diverts out down to Mount Edward Road. The zone of the property is low density residential single, as you can see. with low density R1 zone properties to the rear. So as per the site plan that we required, the accessory structure met all the requirements in regards to setbacks, save and except the two variances that they're requesting tonight, which is the increasing the maximum allowable height as well as the gross floor area. So again, historically staff do not usually accept variance applications on accessory structures, though due to the overhaul and interpretation we received, that we actually can. So we basically analyzed this from purely just a land use standpoint. Taking a look again at the official plan policies, there is no official plan policies in support of enlarged accessory structures. If this was a formal application for a garden suite, then the previous OP policies that I quoted in the last application would apply. But in this instance, from the standpoint of accessory structure, they do not. And so, you know, typically, why do we have the height requirements? Why do we have the size requirements? And really, it's just mass and scale. And it's just to ensure compatibility with residential neighborhoods. Now, the principal dwelling unit is 2 stories. The accessory structure is 2 stories. So that increased height from the principal dwelling unit does mitigate it to some effect. It is situated back deep into the lot. It's screened by a tree canopy. So again, it does mitigate that from a visual standpoint if you're standing out by Mount Edward Road. In fact, when I was on site there, it looked like almost like a 1-story until I actually had to walk in and pass the principal dwelling unit, and I found it was 2 stories. And the primary concern, I guess, that staff has in regards to this application is the potential precedent that this could set. The fact that if staff or if this is moved to be approved, then what's to say that we would have more applications with increasingly enlarged accessory structures coming in. And so I guess staff is of the opinion that instead of granting one-off approvals by a case-by-case basis, which is not a sufficient use of resource or time, we would then advise that there should be perhaps staff should look at the criteria of garden suites, for example, like how could they be fit into character in regards to like what could the maximum gross floor area be? Should there be a percentage of the gross floor area that could be dedicated to a suite, and could that be enlarged? What's the height to look at as well? So one thing I will qualify is that when we inserted the secondary and garden suite provisions in the bylaw, especially for garden suites, it defers to the accessory structures provision of the bylaw, which I don't believe that the accessory structure provisions accounted for uptake for garden suites. So again, that could be something that staff, under direction of council, we could review and look at what other municipalities have done. I've done some jurisdictional scans when I was looking at secondary and garden suites, especially the amendments we're currently looking at decreasing the lot area to 0.3 of an acre. And there are specific design standards that other municipalities have adopted that would permit built form structures that would permit garden suites such as this. But again, we're looking at the application as an accessory structure. So those are just some things that staff just wants to advise the board. The applicant is here to take any questions. He might have something to say as well. And I am on hand as well to take any questions too. Thank you.
Before we bring the applicant in, during construction, you said that we were out on site during construction. Is that correct?
Sorry, Mr. Chair. We received a complaint from an adjacent, from someone in the neighborhood, and so we sent a building inspector out to investigate, and they did find that indeed the structure was being constructed. There was no permit that was approved. The building inspector basically issued or say stop work order to cease and desist the construction. The applicant did, and then made an application for the variance, for the 2 variances for the structure itself.
So when they came back in to get a permit, did we issue the permit?
No, we did not. When they came in for the permit, we stated, looking at the review of the plans, that you would have to first obtain 2 variances for the proposed structure that you're proposing in your plans. So we do have a building permit right now for that structure, but unless the variances are granted approval from council, we can't issue that permit.
Was this the state of the building when our safety inspectors went out?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so it was that far along?
Correct.
Okay, I was thinking that they went...
Stairs put on, it's probably nice.
I believe so. There could be some interior work as well to the second level, but again, the applicant owner is here to answer those questions.
Rosemary, I'm just wondering if I can clarify. So are we saying that it would fit the criteria for a garden suite, but not an accessory structure?
Rosemary, the garden suite provision, whenever you construct a garden suite, you have to basically adhere to the standards of an accessory building. So like a garage, for example. So currently, the property is about 0.44 of an acre, so it wouldn't meet the garden suite lot size requirements because currently it's 0.5. There are amendments right now that council is reviewing to decrease that minimum lot area to 0.3 of an acre. So in this instance, the lot would comply, but it would still not comply with the maximum allowable height and gross floor area for an accessory structure. So even though it would be converted to a garden suite, or if that was the applicant's or owner's wish, he would still have to obtain those variances for that's before the board tonight.
Okay, thanks, Robert.
One thing I will also mention to the board is that we did receive 1 letter of objection and 1 letter of support. The letter of objection was from someone who was circulated within the 100 meters. Their main concerns was non-compliance with the zoning bylaw and the potential to the precedent this could set for other properties to do the same thing. So they had concerns for the compatibility and scale in their neighborhood. The letter of support was from the property owner that's adjacent to this lot, and I believe the property owner is just to the north on Mount Edward Road. So that property owner is actually the closest property that's impacted by this building, and I believe in his letter, but it's included in attachment C, that his main support was that it replaced a dilapidated, I believe, garage. It could increase property values, and he stated that it could provide accommodation for student rental. So I just will qualify that we received 1 letter of objection and 1 letter of support on the proposed application.
Okay. Go ahead, Reg.
Just a question, should we go ahead and reject? What's the process? What would happen?
That's a nice ringtone.
Says it Christmas.
Your face is turning red.
Apologies. I'll take the friend call on that one. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
What's the process if we follow staff recommendation to reject? Where does it go, and the council then accepted that as well? What would happen here?
The next step would be that staff would have to enforce the provisions of the bylaw and council's decision, which would mean that the applicant would have to take down at least the 2nd story and deconstruct in a way where it adheres to the zoning bylaw.
All right. Why don't we bring in the applicant? Maybe we can ask him some questions.
Sure, can
yes.
I just ask Robert just one question?
Sure.
Robert, this setting the precedent, right? Legally, did we look into that? Like, did our legal counsel say that? I thought you got a legal opinion there. I tried to find it here in my notes.
That's a good question, Your Worship. The precedent itself, from a land use perspective, we analyze every situation on its own merits and basis, and it doesn't set precedents in the way that a legal case would.
Right.
The precedent, the word precedent I used in that terminology was just the fact that this could be an example in which other residents could follow and say to council, well, you approved this variance for an enlarged garage or accessory structure, why can't you do the same for me? So even though there would be no legal basis for precedent setting, there could still be a perceived notion of that.
But we're not legally tied to it.
No, we analyze every situation on its own merits from a land use perspective because every case is different, every property is different.
Case by case situation. Thank you.
And you could be looking at it different with the garden suite thing on top, where you said you could go and look at this in a different scope, right? Where, I mean, they put it up with no permit. It's up, but up above, because your garden suites normally wouldn't have that amount of space, would they?
600 square feet, isn't it, at the top?
600 square feet on the top, that's correct. Because the footprint itself is 600, so because in our bylaw, we look at floor area as gross floor area, so we also have to account for all the floors that are there, so it would be 1,200 square feet to us, yeah.
And the garden suite, we allow up to 800 square feet, correct?
Yeah, you could, again, you could increase the size of that garden suite, but again, just the way that our bylaw is written, we have to go with the gross floor area, and in this instance, it's 2 levels, we have to account and add them all up. So
could you amend your bylaw so it wasn't gross floor area and it was just garden suite area?
Yeah, that's kind of what I alluded to in my presentation, was when I was doing other jurisdictional scans of garden suite bylaws and provisions. There are municipalities that that do have kind of ratios, like splits on how much could be dedicated as a garden suite, and then like allow for increased suite sizes. But again, none of those bylaws or amendments staff is proposing. That's just something, direction from council. If council wished for us to do so, that's something we could certainly look at.
Okay, let's bring Mike in. Mike, how are you?
Very good.
Welcome to Planning Board. Robert just kind of ran us through. You probably heard the discussion here. I will certainly address, I'll ask the hard question right off the bat. Why didn't you get a building permit?
Well, I'll tell you what happened. When I originally started the plan to tear down the garage and build a new one, I made the mistake of taking some advice from one of my friends who said that he would help me with the permit process. He said that he would fill it out for me and mail it in and take care of all that. He's done a bunch of stuff with his father with construction and whatnot, but he lives in the country. He sent it to the provincial office, so there was no paperwork in place. And when the inspectors dropped off cards, I thought, okay, great, they're just looking into things. I messaged them back and said thanks for dropping by, and then that's when I found out there was no paperwork in place. So that's when I immediately got the ball rolling on that, and yeah.
Because you can imagine right now the predicament that we're in, a little bit of a tough spot, because again, that building, for what you're asking, is non-conforming or bigger than what we'd normally allow if you came in for the permit process to start. But if we were not to grant you the variances, then you'd be required to take a story off the building. So in one breath, we're saying if we approve it, we're, you know, anyone who complained or has watched this project, we're saying that we're going to turn a blind eye.
Yeah. Something I would like to point out too is that I heard everything that Robert said, that the lot is 0.46, still below 0.5, like you were saying.
Yep.
And the building is not 23 feet, it's 22, 8 inches. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there, but still, I know not within the parameters.
Yeah. You can understand though that it's a little bit tough. Like I said, it's being watched. There was a complaint.
Yes.
That was sent in, and again, I don't think anyone here wants to see the top of the building come off.
Yes.
Which would be an expense. At the same time, we're kind of held accountable to the residents and following the bylaws. So
well, listening to the presentation there about the garden suite, that probably would be the route that I would like to take as far as trying to get the variances accepted.
Okay, I asked the hard questions. Anybody else want to? Reg, did you have a question?
No.
Comment?
Well, a comment would be, if you're thinking about going that route, what about a deferral?
Deferral, this decision, then?
Defer this.
I agree.
He can look at the, a proposal around the garden suite. That was going to be my question. That was going to.
But I think he's. Go ahead, Robert. Did you?
Again, that's what the board wishes to do. That's what they can do. But even if the application did come back in with proposed garden suite, the variances before you tonight would still remain the same. And there would be an added variance if that new amendment for decreasing the minimum lot area to 0.3 of an acre, if that was not adopted by council, then there would be a variance for lot area as well.
When is that going to council?
Monday.
Monday. 0.3, that's going through Monday?
Yeah.
Potentially.
That's what I defer.
Unless you're saying defer until council gets.
That's what I'm thinking.
I'll second that.
Before, because it's.
I don't think I actually put it on the table yet.
What's that?
I said I don't think I put it on the table yet. But I think, based on what I heard, I'd try and go that route.
And have this same. So if
We're
council
gonna have
does.
the same discussion anyway.
If council approves the text amendment to allow for the assess or the lot size to drop to 0.3 of an acre, then you're saying that that's great. Bring this back next month for discussion. But if it doesn't pass, then we're still going to be back here with the variance underneath the half acre. I don't listen. Whatever you choose to do, it's. I'm just the chair.
Do a good job, Chair.
Robert, can I ask a question to you? I'm just wondering, so like, can anyone apply for a variance of a garden suite now? Or is this like the first time this is ever?
Yeah. So this would be technically the first time that we've accepted and processed an application for a variance on an accessory structure, an accessory building.
Yeah.
So in effect, one could argue, yes, that garden suite could apply to that provision as well. So there's certain requirements of the bylaw that aren't subject to variance. There's certain aspects that are. In this instance, for a garden suite, again, it depends on what direction council takes with like the lot area variance. But then you're still technically back looking at the accessory structure provisions on whether to vary those or not, because the garden suite still follows the accessory structure provisions of the bylaw. But yes, this would be technically a good test of the bylaw for, in this instance, yes.
Do we have any second floor garden suites in the city now? We do have some.
Well, I know. I don't know if they do.
You better not say yes.
Crowds names around it.
Yeah.
I do know that there's situations in town, especially some older carriage houses, where they've converted some of the loft space into living space, and basically indeed acts as a garden suite. Whether legal or not, I can't comment on that, but there are instances where that has occurred. But again, that's why staff brought forward the secondary garden suite registry bylaw, was so that we can get a lot of these undocumented suites on the registry, inspected, ensure they're safe, publicize it on our website so when people are looking for resident accommodation, they can ensure that the suite is safe and meets all requirements of the building code. So in this instance, the applicant, the owner, would still have to obtain the building permit. They would still have to go through building code review. All of those requirements would still apply. Lot drainage plan would have to be submitted to ensure that those storm pipes are in fact discharging the water to Mount Edward Road and it's not going onto the neighbor's property.
I'd like to point out that the drainage pipes are going the same direction that the ones that were on the previous garage, so they're going right into the depression that goes right to the drain pipe at the front of the property.
So all the requirements for a building permit would still apply.
Okay.
Is the intent to rent the top floor?
Yeah, eventually that is the intent. Based on the situation economically and just in the world in general, right now, since having to close, and we just recently reopened the business, and we're operating at a reduced schedule, and I'm basically stretched to the limit financially. I mean, I have no resources to tear down the top portion of the building. It's a beautiful building. It looks great on the property. No neighbors have, you know, come to me and complained, and I have the neighbor next door that supports it completely, and it sits back on the property great amongst the trees, looks great. It's a huge improvement. I don't know what else I can really tell you, except that it does look really good on the property. And
short-term rentals or long-term? Was that already asked by Basil?
Long-term would be fine. It all depends on what it would be for. The neighbor that came forth with support, he hosts international students from Japan and other countries, and I thought that was a great idea. It'd probably be something like that, or it would be long-term rental students, small, like a couple, something like that. Would be good for that.
If this is being categorized as a garden suite, then we're saying we can't short-term rental garden suites.
It would have to be a long-term.
That's correct. So under the current regulation following secondary garden suites, it would have to be for long-term rental.
Okay.
Which is in excess of 28 days.
Okay. Yeah, there's no plans for Airbnb, if that's what you're suggesting. I have no interest in that.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments? And Mike, this one's puzzling because I don't think anyone here is saying that it doesn't look good. It's just around the rules and regulations and bylaws, right? It has nothing. It's not personal. It's not like anything like that. So this is simply around rules and.
I'm just I'm not sure what you base the height variance decision on in this context. Like for a main building downtown, we would have kind of rules for that. I'm just not sure what merit you judge the height, what would be acceptable, I guess, and what are the criteria for it being acceptable?
Based on that question too, if the allowable height is 17.5 or 20 was another number you threw out there at me, even if it's lessened by that amount, it still has the same, whatever person was complaining. I don't know, you said somebody complained, but I mean, it's not going to change the, what they're looking at, really. A couple of feet.
So technically, your question is basically how do you judge the mass? It's basically the massing and the scale when we're looking at compatibility from a land use perspective. So, for example, that last garden suite that we looked at, it was a two-story house with basically a one-story bungalow-esque style suite, right? So you could see that structure was clearly subordinate to the principal use being the main dwelling. In this instance here, it's a perfect picture. We do have a two-story house, and the tree canopy mitigates that, yes, but that's also 2 stories. Usually, when you're looking at different bylaws in different municipalities, they always have restriction on height and size for accessory buildings because they have to be accessory to the main use. They don't necessarily want these large garages that kind of overtake the character of the lot, that might be out of scale with the dwelling unit itself. There's some instances that municipalities have a standard rule that an accessory building or structure has to remain at a lesser height than the principal structure, just based on that reason. And usually that's just to enforce the character and compatibility when you're looking at massing and scale involved in your residential neighborhoods. So that's usually kind of the criteria that we assess when we look at applications, is the scale and fit of a structure in relation to the neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I think from a massing perspective, this kind of looks okay to me in terms of scale. If that's the criteria.
Yeah. How close is it to the property line?
8 feet.
All right, folks. Again, not always easy, but if someone wants to put a motion on the floor. Rich, you got a question?
I'm still stuck with the deferral, because if I'm not, I would want to support staff in their initial bylaw. It doesn't conform to the bylaws as they stand, and they're, I don't want to reject it just for that reason, if he comes back in a month's time after council approves the garden home amendments, everything would fit, and he would still come back and look for the variance. I guess it's just on the same two variances. Is that, yeah.
If the amendments were passed and adopted by council to decrease lot area to 0.3 of an acre, that's correct. The same variances that are before you tonight would still have to be approved.
But you'd have a better chance of making it through. Would that make staff feel a little better about the project, or is it too early to tell? I'm trying to get an answer tonight.
He's asking you for deferral approval.
And that's why I'm proposing a deferral. Okay. That's all.
Well, we can't, I mean, we can defer as long as we know what we're deferring for. So I guess my question to staff is, if it's deferred, does it change anything with this application? In your mind, that you would come back with something different than you've written today? Because
basically from a land use analysis, and I kind of stated this in my presentation, that if it were an application for a garden suite, there would be official plan policies that would support infill, intensification, providing alternative forms of housing, density along like municipal services and service streets. Processing it as an accessory structure, there is no official plan support for large accessory buildings on that. But if you were to analyze it from a different light, then you're looking at providing residential accommodation, you're looking at OP policies. But again, I will also point out what I also stated during the presentation was that instead of doing one-offs, that it's a better use of resources and time than to direct staff to look at this holistically. Take a look at, again, we've already done the research for other municipalities. We were looking at lot size, lot area requirements. If we took that back and we looked at the scale and the form of what could a garden suite, how could that be compatible, right, with the surrounding neighborhood? What has other municipalities determined to be fitting the fitting character of the neighborhood? Then I would say that would be a more proactive approach than approving, say, one in isolation and then having, one-offs come in over the months and the years, where you're taking a look at this day in, day out. Rather, take a look at it from a holistic standpoint and say, well, should staff start looking at different design criteria, like for height and scale and massing for an accessory building when it's used as a garden suite, rather than a garage to store your vehicles?
So if we were to defer this, that would be the direction we'd be giving staff, correct? Is that what was that what you're kind of helping out with?
Yeah.
If that was the case, I would look at council on Monday to defer the other piece of the puzzle for garden suites, the smaller lot size, and then when this is resolved to whatever it resolved to, I'd bring them both to council at the same time. Garden suites are new to the city, and I think this is our third, fourth amendment already to garden suites. I think if you do too many at different times, I think it raises a lot of red flags to the public. And seeing that we're doing the lot size change, I would say if we're deferring it tonight, I would urge council to defer that portion of the amendments next week. And then when we resolve this, if it is something that we do want to move forward to council to approve, I would move it with the lot size being reduced down to 0.3. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, so just a point of clarification.
Yes.
Right now, it requires 0.5
Correct.
acre, right? So he needs a variance for that, because he's got a 0.42,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
0.46.
Yeah, so we need a variance for that. If we get to 0.3, as the chair said, if we do everything together, so we're not going back and looking at it again and going back, let's do a complete package. So I second deferral.
Well, do we have a deferral on the floor? Reg, have you?
That's what I started with.
Okay, so we have
my motion to defer.
Okay, so we have a motion to defer. And staff, are you okay with the direction for the deferral? Okay. Your Worship, you second the deferral? Okay.
Question.
Is there any other questions or comments? Okay, all in favor of deferral? Okay, opposed? Okay, motion for deferral is granted, so, all right, staff will be in touch as we work through this.
Very good. Thanks so much for your time, everybody. Thank you, Robert.
That's not the one I was thinking.
Okay, we're back to number, do you want to do this in the package, Greg? 2, 3, 4, and 5?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, it's Rosemary. I'm wondering if I can just ask one follow-up question.
Sure.
Are there any consequences for going ahead and building without having a building permit?
No. Well, we can double the permit fee. Yeah, that's right. So we can
$50 to $100.
We can go from 50 to 100.
It's not a very big consequence.
Ask my 15-year-old daughter that, and she'll tell you it's a big consequence. $50 means a lot to her.
Mr. Chair, we're looking at meeting with the ministers responsible for planning to look at some kind of summary finding, right?
We're hoping. Yes. All right, moving on. So Greg, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
All right, so in light of recent restrictions for restaurants due to the coronavirus and social distancing requirements, a number of establishments are looking for alternative ways to get more seating for their customers while adhering to public health requirements. One of the ways to do that is have outdoor seating. So as per our bylaw, you can't put seating in required parking spaces. If you had a surplus on your property, you can use it for outdoor seating, but in the next 4 cases, they are all required parking spaces, so they cannot be reduced without a variance process, which we're going through now. Basically, our bylaw allows variances for temporary structures that are prohibited by the bylaw for no longer than 1 year. The committee also determined, the Planning and Heritage Committee determined that the application fees for these variances would be deferred until the end of September. So we sent out letters we sent it to Dawn Allen at the Downtown Charlottetown Inc., and she sent around letters to see who was interested in this. We received 4 applications in total. So each one does need a separate resolution. So the first one is 131 Sydney Street. That is the old Dublin pub. Essentially, they have 3 spaces on their property. In the downtown, you can't reduce, there's no real parking requirements for existing buildings, but you can't reduce what you have. So they do have 3 spaces, all technically are required. Because of that, they're looking to put a patio underneath the deck or existing patio there above. If you walked by it recently, it is there today. Essentially, it'll be for 1 year. We sent out letters. We received 4 letters of support, and we're recommending approval until the end of October 2020.
All right. Any questions on this one? Anyone have a motion?
Motion to
I move, Rosemary.
Okay, Rosemary, motion to accept, seconded by Councillor McCabe. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion is carried.
All right, so the next one, it's the same spiel. It's for Soul Food Restaurant at 330 University Avenue. The property in general requires X number of parking spaces. They are at that requirement, if not slightly under. So every space again is required. They're looking to put a patio which will occupy 3 spaces. Again, it is there today if you drove by. We sent out letters and we received no letters in respect to this property. So same resolution approving for 3 spaces until the end of October 2020.
Reg? Okay, move to accept. Okay, seconded by Chris. All in favor? Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion is carried.
Your picture was taken before then.
Yeah, this is when they applied. The third application is for 70 Grafton Street, which is the pilot house. Currently, they have a patio outside now, and they have forever, and they have 2 parking spaces. You can kind of see the cars parked there right now in the plan. So 2 parking spaces in front. They're looking to essentially expand the existing patio they have towards the sidewalk. So you can kind of see how they can drive in where the truck's going in the picture. So there's 2 spaces there. We sent out letters, 2 letters of support, and are recommending outdoor patio occupy 2 spaces until the end of October.
And it's not there yet, that's a plus.
That one's not there yet.
All right.
They should get bonus points for that.
Does that get double approval? All right. Anyone want to put a motion on the floor? Okay, motion to
I'll
approve.
second it.
Okay, moved and seconded. Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion is carried.
Alright, so last one is 41 Allen Street. It's the Up Street Brewery. They're looking for 5 parking spaces. Essentially, they do have a small patio now, but it would take the majority of that those parking spaces right in front of the business. There would be fencing around the proposed patio. There was talks about maybe a food truck too, but that's not part of the application before you today. So they're looking to occupy 5 spaces. We sent out letters to everyone within 100 meters. We received 2 letters. They weren't necessarily opposed, but their concerns were that if parking is temporarily removed, where will those customers go? Will it be on Walton or at Van Campen's greenhouse? I had discussion with the applicant and property owner or business owner after receiving those letters of opposition, and they basically said Up Street Brewery today or normal times would hold approximately 100 people. Due to the limiting restrictions in place, they have 4 tables on the inside, so they can hold 16 people on the inside of the building. And obviously the takeout customers for both beer and food if so desired. The anticipated capacity of the outdoor patio will be approximately 30 people, so with the 5 people being removed, and the capacity of the total property is half as much. So in the end, staff feel that this variance is reasonable. There's 50 less people, but there's 5 less parking spaces, so I think the math will work out that all people looking to eat or drink at Up Street Brewery will have sufficient parking. And staff are recommending approval of 5 spaces till the end of October 2020.
All right, Bobby? Yep. Move. To accept? To accept? Okay. Basil, second? Second. Perfect. Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried.
Chair,
yes,
I
sir.
say, Greg, I was down to the Soul Restaurant, and Steve, the owner, would have just found this as a way that has given his business a second breath, and I'm sure you'll find that from the brewery on Allen Street. I think it's McPhee, is it Kent McPhee down at Old Dublin Pub?
Yep. Yeah. So what do you eat at Soul Food?
Number 24 is pretty good.
Number 5 is really good.
Anyway, thank you very much. Job well done.
Shout out to Soul Food. Okay. Going through my list, I guess we're moving on to number 8.
You want to do number 9 so Ellen doesn't have to change the PowerPoint one more time?
I would love to do number 9.
Save her a couple clicks.
Number 9. 35 Conley Street. Whenever you're ready, Greg. I'm not yet, but... Okay, whenever you're ready.
All right, so this is a request. It's 35 Conley Street. Right now it's located in the shopping center C3 zone. So if you're not familiar with it, essentially in this photo to the left would be Valley Village and the associated shopping mall. To the right, kind of behind that White House, would be RBC, and then Papa Joe's is in behind there. So The lot is basically the green space you see between the cars, or some of the cars, and the White House there.
There's a snow fence around it now.
Exactly, yep. Yeah, so you drove by, it's kind of marked out. So this is a request to proceed to public consultation. They're looking to rezone from the C3 zone to the MUC zone. Essentially what they're looking to do is construct a single detached dwelling. The property is quite narrow, but it would meet the requirements of like an R1N zone. So rezoning to the MUC zone would allow step downs to the R1N zone. So looking at the context of the neighborhood, obviously there's a shopping center and commercial developments around it, but there's the north side of Conley Street is zoned C3, while the south side is zoned MUC, mixed use. So on the north side, there's a mixed use building which contains one residential dwelling unit, a single attached dwelling, a duplex dwelling. The subject property is vacant, and then obviously the shopping center, which is Valley Village Complex. On the south side, there's a mixed use development which includes 15 residential dwelling units, 3 single attached dwellings, 2 parking lots, and the bingo hall. So obviously the street is quite diverse. The single attached dwellings that do exist in the C3 zone would be legal non-conforming. The zone today does not allow for single attached dwellings to be constructed. The MUC zone on the south side of the street does allow it. So the applicants are looking to rezone to the MUC zone in order to construct a single attached dwelling. Should this be approved to proceed to public consultation, we would send notices at that time. So the public have not been notified to date. So the subject property is 41.4 feet in lot frontage and about 4,000 square feet in lot area. And the only permitted use in the MUC zone, should it be rezoned, would be a single attached dwelling due to those lot sizes. Essentially, while a single attached dwelling is on a narrow lot would not be permitted in the C3 zone, it would be permitted in the R1N or MUC. However, in the R1N, you'd have to do an official plan designation from commercial to residential, but in the MUC, it would keep the same designation from commercial in the official plan. So there's a number of policies in the official plan which could support an application of this nature. It's compact urban form, infill development. It's more efficient use of services than a vacant lot is. The footprint, height, massing is physically related to the residential dwellings in the neighborhood. Obviously, it is not physically related to the commercial developments. And there could be an appropriate relation between height and density of the development with the mixed-use areas of the neighborhood. That being said, when you have non-conforming properties, you typically look to have them become conforming at some point in the future. So rezoning it, while you could argue on the north side it's a spot rezoning, on the south side it would match those uses. But essentially, staff. There is stuff that could support it if that's the way planning board and council wanted to go, but ultimately staff are recommending that it be rejected. And the main reason is that for the most part there is a commercial nature to this neighborhood. There is some residential, but for the most part it is a commercial area. And rezoning it to allow the development of single attached dwelling will almost guarantee it would remain residential for the foreseeable future. A lot of the times when you see neighborhoods being kind of renovated, demolished, smaller housing stock for a larger commercial building, those are typically older houses, so when you put a brand new one there, the likelihood is that new one will remain for some time. Staff feel that this area, the C3 zone, it's meant for a larger commercial development, and there is very few C3 zone properties in the city. Obviously the mall and a number of other large shopping centers, but that's the idea, is that it is for shopping centers, not for single attached dwellings. So there was a single attached dwelling located on that property in 2002, and when it was demolished, it really did limit the owner's options for future development because of the limited size of the lot. So reintroducing it may create potential conflict with land uses, adjacent commercial land uses. But staff realized that due to the size of the property, if this rezoning was rejected, there's really not much you can do with it without having very significant variances, or unless the properties get consolidated. So I guess you kind of have to decide if you want to allow a single attached dwelling that could arguably be compatible, but at the same time would limit really any future commercial uses, but rejecting it would effectively remain it as vacant until the whole neighborhood was developed as a kind of a comprehensive development. So
you're saying that a Costco is not going there?
I'd be very surprised if they fit on that street. So there's definitely things to support it, but ultimately staff are recommending against it.
So Greg, I look up the street here on my Google map here, and adjacent to it is a house.
Yeah.
The next, on the same side, the next place up after that is a house. The next place is right at the corner, which is, it looks like apartments and a business.
Yep.
It does say that on the sign, yeah. And then across the road's apartment. You're okay with across the road though, it's just this side. But if I'm going down the street, everything leading down to this lot is residential.
Yeah. So except potentially the mixed-use building on the corner, I'd have to look at that, but the two single-attached dwellings would be legal non-conforming. But yeah, I mean the street is, I mean, all of Conley Street is fairly narrow, but for the most part, there's really no separation of the parking lot and Conley Street where Valley Village or the Murphy's Pharmacy is.
Yeah.
So it kind of becomes more separated, which makes it feel more narrow at the east end of Conley, but
Put a little more light on it.
yeah.
P and Valley, on the corner of Valley and Conley.
Yeah.
That big blue sector, the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lots up are all owned by the Sherwood Parkdale Lions Club.
Yeah. So
they own those two properties in
the two vacant ones are parking lot.
432 are owned by Parkdale Sherwood. So when you can in essence say that's a whole strip of land owned by one group, and so you're left with only a couple of houses in a few years. Let's say as things deteriorate along there, the houses are quite old. They're not spending a lot of money on upkeep on those houses anywhere in that area.
Yeah, basically there's 4 single attached dwellings and a duplex.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think what the landowner would do with such a small parcel of land. They're not going to do anything commercial on that. They'd have to basically sell it.
It wouldn't meet any kind of lot area requirements for commercial development, so it'd have to be joined with other properties. And it'd have to be a more comprehensive plan for all.
Pretty hard. We limit how much bargaining power they have when city council denies any kind of development there.
Again, you just have to be mindful though that there's not that much shopping center zoning, and if you chew that up, then you're going to get an application in somebody else's neighborhood for a shopping center zone, right? So this is kind of a little bit akin to, not to the same extent of Sherwood Road, but that's an industrial area. Somebody was quite content to put an apartment there. I mean, the owner is sort of, we're trying to be balanced on this application. But, and again, I think to the point of that all of them may go at the same time. And when it goes, it'll go very quickly. And that lot will be extremely valuable to somebody who wants it. But once that house goes up, there's likely not going to be any movement on the other ones because the other ones are depreciating in value. So that's a little bit of the argument. What is the future of that area? And is it going to be commercial? Because if it goes back to residential, then there's going to be demand for space somewhere else in the city. So we'll be dealing with an application somewhere else to accommodate it.
Mr. Chair, can I just ask a question?
You may, Your Worship.
Greg, if I look at C2, I'm just trying to figure this out. Point of clarification. Under C2, permitted uses, it does not list, as it does in C3, excluding the uses of semi-detached dwellings and duplex dwellings. So is a duplex and a single-family detached dwelling allowed in a C2 zone? Is that what it means?
Yeah, I'll show you here. So in the Essentially, in the C2 zone, it would step down to the R4A and the MUC zone, or so it'd step down to R4A, which would then step down to R3T, which would exclude the single attached dwelling. So in the C2 zone, it would not be permitted, but in the C3 zone, it would not be permitted. So the C3 zone, for example, says you're allowed the R4A minus the semi-attached dwellings, but when you get to R4A, that's when it says you can't have the single attached dwelling. So our bylaw is all a step-down process. So at the highest point, the highest zone, it might look like it's permitted, but when you actually get down to the weeds, it's not yet. But the MUC zone, for example, breaks down a different route, which allows them. So, yeah.
Thank you, sir.
All right, any other questions, comments?
It's Rosemary, and I have mixed feelings about it because the plans look quite nice for the house, and it is a vacant lot. However, I also see the issue of the zoning and future development, so just not sure which way to go with this.
Yeah, I think that looking at all the faces in here right now, I don't know if anyone has the answer. We'll find out here shortly, because someone's going to have to put a motion on the floor.
And this is just to go to public consultation?
That's right.
Yeah. Right.
It is. So staff's recommendation is to reject, not go to public consultation. Does the planning board here want to go to a public consultation and hear from the residents?
If you're looking for a motion, I agree with staff. If you want to keep the same composition of all the properties for future use, then I agree with staff to reject going to and I'll make a motion to reject.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to reject going to a public meeting.
How long did you say this has been vacant for?
I think it's in 2002 it was demolished.
2002?
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously they haven't been doing much with it for a while. Maybe waiting for that area to develop.
And it's all reclaimed.
They put a fence up because people used to pile snow there and they stopped it.
I think actually like the aerial photos in behind the zoning layer here, but I think some of those parking spaces actually encroach onto that property, maybe 2 or 3 feet. So some of those parking spaces would be removed too if that house was built because of the, I mean, it's their property, but,
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where you can kind of see the property line and they fenced out what they could.
Looks pretty small, doesn't it?
All right, so we do have a motion on the floor to accept staff's recommendation to reject going to a public meeting. Do I have anyone to second that motion? Okay, we have a seconder. Perfect. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Chair,
yes.
I always believe in public consultation, so I'll be voting against the resolution.
Okay.
Because, hey, just to open it up, I know it's another meeting, but it's good to get public input
okay.
in that area, and who knows, maybe the Sherwood Parkfield organization.
Well, they'll get a letter. Hmm? They'll get a letter.
Not unless this motion is accepted.
But Rosemary, I have a question too, just around the city's medium and long-term goals. Do we want to see more shopping malls? Like, is that what we would hope would come in that area with some more land acquisition, or what do we see as the future of that land, ideally?
Yeah, I think it's more that we don't want to reduce the existing stock you have. It's like, I mean, we're not developers, but at the same time, I mean, there's definitely official plan policy that would support both ways. But I mean, ultimately, like Alex said, if you remove C3 from one area of the city, there's typically demand for it somewhere else in the city. So whether this is the appropriate place for someone who wants to tear down a few houses and build it, or if they can find somewhere else more appropriate, that would have to be rezoned. But I mean, you can kind of make a debate both ways on it.
But this has been zoned that for a long time. That's the issue, and it's harder to get it rezoned somewhere else. So I would just point that out. It's been, you know, when the people that bought the properties, they knew for a long time. Has it been C2 since he tore it down?
Yeah, I don't recall it ever not being C2.
So that is the long-term intent in that block, C2.
Okay, so we do have a motion on the floor, moved and seconded, to accept staff's recommendation to reject, go into a public meeting. Let's put that to a vote. So all in favor of objecting this going to a public meeting, put your hand up. 2, 3, 4. Okay, opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. Rosemary. You're the tiebreaker. Thank God you're here. Don't hang up.
The static.
She started out by saying how difficult it was.
And you're left with the tiebreaker.
Wow.
Yeah, that's fine.
So which way do you want to go, Rosemary? Do you want to accept staff's recommendation to reject, or do you want to reject staff's recommendation to reject?
I'm going to accept the staff's recommendation to reject.
Okay. So motion is carried. 5-4. Thank you, Rosemary.
So no public meeting.
No public meeting. All right, 9 is done. Okay, Robert. Good try, Your Worship. Made late pitch. Came out of the bullpen. All right, number 8. Which is Sherwood Road.
All right, so the application before you tonight is a recommendation to approve the official plan redesignation to industrial from comprehensive development, and also to rezone the property from comprehensive development area to M3, business park industrial. I believe that the board members and certainly the members of council convened on June the 30th that night when we hosted the public meeting on the application, the rezoning application. But just to give a bit of an overview in regards to what the proposal is for. So again, basically a portion of the property is already rezoned or zoned to M3, which would accommodate at least Fitzgerald and Snow's construction offices, as well as their warehouse for storage of their equipment and materials. The remainder balance is CDA. So again, the rezoning would clean up the issue of having split zones, and also allow for more flexibility for the other portion of the lot, which is basically to develop a large truck maintenance and repair shop for tractor trailers, and then possibly a couple of spaces to lease to industrial businesses in the future. Both would have outside storage components of their construction material and some equipment, and as well as some indoor storage. So that's this proposed site plan. Fitzgerald and Snow's offices would be basically to the eastern portion of the property that's already zoned M3, and then to the western portion of the property would be the tractor trailer truck fleet maintenance building, as well as some lease spaces. So that's the proposed official plan redesignation and the rezonings. From our perspectives, from staff's perspective, it meets the intent and purposes of the industrial zone, as well as the built out of the area. Sherwood Road is an industrial park. Such a use that would cater to these types of uses, such as construction, offices and maintenance, storage buildings, as well as large tractor trailer repair dealerships. It would all fit within those industrial type uses and within that area. So staff would recommend to approve the official plan redesignation, as well as the rezoning on some conditions, and all these conditions would have to be satisfied anyway at time of building permit. But again, I would just point out that one condition is the servicing aspect. So currently, the property remains unserviced. There's no water or sewer. So the servicing concept would have to be approved by the utility department. So city staff would look at that and approve that, as well as the work that would go into that, as well as a tree buffer along the northern edge of the property. So directly to the north, there is property that is zoned R2, which is low density residential. So in order to mitigate any potential impacts from the proposed industrial uses, again, staff, and this is a requirement of the bylaw under the landscaping requirements, whenever you have an industrial zone next to a sensitive land use or zone in this perspective, which would be residential, we would require mitigation through screening, such as a fence or a tree buffer. So all those conditions would be covered at time of building permit. So staff would just recommend that the rezoning and the redesignation be approved. And I can answer any questions. Thanks,
Robert. Councillor Cody, have you heard anything from your residents on Penny Lane stuff?
No, the tree buffer would be a good idea. Like you say, it's warranted or needed anyway. But
any other questions or comments?
You don't have to buffer in around Island EMS there, do you?
No, in this instance, since Island EMS remains in an industrial zone as a use, though the screening wouldn't apply to that case, and just the residential parcel to the north.
Piece of land behind the new building on the left, which is a fairly large vacant piece, and that could be used for anything in that commercial zone.
Are you referring just west of the subject property, the CDA?
West and north, I guess you'd say. So where they're on the other plan, where it shows the building, two buildings there. So in behind here is a fairly large chunk of land, which then could be subdivided again, or?
In this instance, they wouldn't be able to subdivide that portion. That would be the back portion of these lands here that's being applied for the rezoning redesignation. They would need frontage on a public street in order to do so. Okay. And at this time, I'm not aware of any application to run a public street back there. And I believe when I was talking to both applicants, they wish to use the rear portion for their warehousing and storage of some materials.
All right, any other questions or comments? All right, need a motion.
Move.
To accept?
Yes, sir.
Okay, got a motion to accept, seconded by Reg, thank you. All right, if there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. All right, we're trucking along, folks. Did that Towers? So we're down to John Yo Drive, number 13. All right, Robert, whenever you're ready.
So the board has seen this application before, yes. This was just the last month, and it was just for a rear yard reduction in order to ensure that the new proposed building falls in line with the existing building towards the east, which is also another commercial plaza. And in this case, the applicant, moving the application ahead to the last meeting, they wanted to include this. It was left out of the application. Should have gone with the last application, but now it's before you tonight. And it's essentially to consolidate a portion of which was previously a road allowance. It was going to be used as a future connection for a road to enter to the northern portion of that lot. And then again to consolidate that with the parcel and then subdivide that parcel in two so that we have the commercial offices on one portion and the warehouse on the second lot. Conversations with the Public Works Department when we were looking at the need for a future road connector. It was determined at that time from Public Works that they would rather have a road connection onto Sherwood Road, which is further north. They sought that they would rather divert any type of industrial use, since that's the area in which that's the development that would have to occur there, to be diverted to the intersection there at the highway and Sherwood Road at the controlled intersection. They also stated that when they were looking at potential future connections, if they were going to take a connector, it would align up to the street, John Yo Drive, before it bends on the eastern corner there. They would rather take a road connector there in order to have just come straight through for a future road connector. So when we looked at it, staff didn't have any concerns. We consulted Public Works. They had no concerns with it. And the future road connector to the east of the existing lot would be a better fit, in their opinion, based on allowing traffic to go straight through rather than doing any turns, as well as providing frontage for that existing lot and the existing building that's in the corner there. So staff's just bringing it forward to the planning board for recommendation approval.
Okay, thanks, Robert. Any questions, comments? All right, does someone want to put a motion forward?
I'll move to accept staff's recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Motion to accept, seconded by whoever you want to pick that one. All right, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, motion is carried. And last but not least, 14, amendments to the zoning and development bylaw.
All right.
So I guess if we wanted, this is probably the area we probably could defer if we wanted to, the other piece. If we wanted to.
Mr. Chair, yes, that's absolutely, you can, this is the piece I believe that the planning board was looking at deferring. It was the minimum lot size for garden suites to reduce it from 0.5 of an acre to 0.3 of an acre. And I believe the direction that staff received was that we reevaluate how a garden suite should be built, like in regards to built form. So we look at the structure, not just the lot itself, and just do it comprehensively. So that's something that staff obviously can take back and reevaluate. Again, I believe everyone was here for the presentation, probably heard my spiel on the rest of the amendments. So for brevity's sake, I'm welcome to take any questions that the board might have for the rest of the amendments.
So, Mr. Chair, would we have to go back to a public consultation?
No.
No, we done it, that's done.
Yeah, we deferred it. We don't have to go for a public consultation on this piece, but if we take any future amendments to the garden suites, we'd have to take that piece to a public meeting. So I'm not sure if there is any sense on deferring. I don't know. It's up to the board, I guess. Potatoes, potatoes. So yeah.
The board could defer the provision regards to garden suites, and perhaps that's if that's the board's wish, and then we can take the garden suite provision and lump it in with the requirements for the structures itself, if that's what the board wishes to do.
Is that going to make it easier for you? Because really, if you 0.33 or what 0.3 instead of what is it, 0.33 instead of 0.5?
It's 0.5 an acre to 0.3 of an acre.
For 0.3 of an acre, because that, regardless, it's there already. You could amend it again with coming back and more. You got to get that through before you're really going to worry about what it's going to look like and height variances and stuff.
We could take it in any fashion, any form. You could approve the garden suites, the lot size, and move it on as is if there's no concerns with the 0.3 of an acre. If you wish for it to be deferred in this instance and then lumped in with future amendments looking at the size and massing of garden suites, so if we come up with particular regulations around that, and like the chair said, we would have to take those amendments to a public meeting, then the 0.3 of an acre could be, again, added on to that meeting for anyone that might have questions in regards to garden suites, and it could be looked at from a comprehensive perspective from that way, but the board can so choose any which way they wish to deal with this.
And the only reason why I suggested that in the first place was just because the amount of times that the public's going to hear garden suite. So if council has garden suites on the table docket this month to approve, and all of a sudden we have garden suites again on the table, it may draw some red flags. I'm not sure. I don't know.
I think
I just threw it out there as a option. It's irrelevant to me.
Change garden suites to be part of secondary apartments, is that right? Falls under secondary.
No, I think that .3 would.
No, but we discussed garden suites. In the past, they were used for short-term rentals. Now they're not under the new secondary accommodations. What is it, the term?
The accessory apartments.
Well, we already had the
Secondary
public
apartments,
meeting on the .3, so why not get
Oh,
push that
I'd say
through?
I'm-
And then we can come back and look at what it would look like if they even accept the .3. Council has to accept .3.
Yeah, during the public meeting, there was a resident there.
Yeah.
That raised some concerns with the .3 reduction in lot area. So there was someone that was there that voiced a concern.
Yeah.
Again, we can take this any way you wish. The .3 still has to go before council, regardless. But if you want it included with the with revised provisions that looking at garden suites separately from accessory structures, so could there be alternative designs to it? Then we could lump it in with that. But it's
Well,
so
I think you have to
choose
get
council.
this through before you even worry about what design looks like, because right now, I mean, personally, I'd move all what we went to public meeting on to council.
Do you see the .3 potentially changing with any further review that you do? Could it alter? If you saw the potential of the .3 being altered in any capacity, I would then probably suggest deferring it in the event that...
Mr. Chair, it's Rosemary, and I've just been wondering about the rationale supporting the garden suites, because I think one of the main issues supporting it is our vacancy rates and need for housing. But at the same time, I'm wondering, if we could do some analysis of our own approvals we've been approving a lot of apartment buildings, and I'm just wondering what our vacancy rates, what we project them to be. I know the official rates don't come out till the fall, but I think if we go, we might get questions from the public. There was one gentleman raised issues at our public meeting there last week.
Yep.
Rosemary, his question was about the 380 going to 1900. If you went from 0.5 acres to 0.3.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and the potential was for 1,900 garden suites in the city, right?
And that's long-term resident.
That's correct.
Yeah, but are we going to need that, I guess, is my question, based on, what we know we've approved for apartment buildings. What are we projecting our vacancy rates to be over the next 6 to 12 months?
That's a moving target. I think everyone's opinion might be different, Rosemary. I mean, I have my own thoughts on where it could be, but...
I think we have to go back and look at what we've approved. Like, how many units have we approved over the past 12 months, and what are we projecting our vacancy rates to be based on those numbers?
Yeah.
If you look at this is looking down the road. So 380 now, 1,900 down the road. I don't think we're going to have a flurry of applications. I think that was the gentleman's point, is that this could open floodgates. Well, no, not really. It just gives an option to someone that has 0.3 acres to put an accessory building on his or her property for a garden suite.
And we only had, two or three applications last year, I think it was?
I believe we had 2 official applications last year, yes.
Okay, so what do we want to do, folks? Do we want to push forward with all the amendments, or do we want to defer the one piece of this? It's up to you folks.
I'm going to put a motion on the floor to move forward with what we've already done through our public meeting to council for approval.
Okay, so a motion on the floor to accept all amendments.
I'll second.
Second it, perfect, okay. Is there any other questions or conversation, comments?
Well, I'd like to go back to your point, Mr. Chair, is that you wanted to look at a comprehensive package.
Oh, it doesn't matter to me, Your Worship. Honestly, I didn't know if it...
I think the staff were suggesting we look at the big package, correct?
I guess one thing I could mention is that if we did take back proposed amendments at design, looking at compatibility and scale of building form, we could perhaps focus on build form and compatibility rather than lot size. You know, the lot size basically enables additional properties to do garden suites. So if council approved that, then you've just enabled residents to uptake that. And then the second part would be staff would be looking at ensuring that those structures would fit the form and character of residential neighborhoods.
Okay. Good?
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you very much, sir.
perfect. Motion on the floor to approve, and seconded, I believe, as well. So if there's no further questions, all in favor? Okay, opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion is carried. And I believe that's a wrap. I need a motion to adjourn.
I motion to do that. Seconded by myself.
Congratulations, folks. We just hit 14.
You know how you said today, I'm not putting my plate on. You should get Howard Road.
And none of them were too...